All right, welcome to the first episode of Red, White, and Blues. So you probably have seen Chelsea and I collaborate on a number of different things over the years, from a Smart Cities playbook to just talking about what's going on in the world of GovTech. This was an idea that came out of some texting. I think it was in the evening where we were just talking about the state of what's happening in GovTech, and really our desire to have a platform to talk about what is not being talked about, to look at telling the stories that need to be told, but also telling the stories that don't always get surfaced to the top when you think about traditional media. And so that's what this is for. We're going to have kind of an organic discussion. This is episode 1, so you're kind of learning with us along this journey. And what we thought would be interesting to talk about for this first episode is really looking at the New York Times put out an article around U.S. coronavirus response. And so it's been amazing to watch how state and local government agencies have really stepped up to the plate and have responded to COVID-19, have deployed a number of different technologies. And this was kind of an article that is an example of what we want to have more conversations around. And that was the bottleneck side of it. So what didn't work? What didn't go well? And in this case, the fax machine kind of proved to be a bottleneck in COVID-19 response, because as we transform the country and put in place all kinds of new infrastructure to allow test results to go to hospitals, and in hospitals to send it to public health authorities, there was a breakdown in the fact that these weren't all modernized at the same time. And so this has proved to kind of showcase the need for greater collaboration across the country. And so we thought it'd be a good starting point, good inspiration for our first conversation to think about, really the bottlenecks of digital transformation and the things that we should be talking about that we're not talking about. So I have now talked too much. So Chelsea, what do you think about all of that?
Yeah, no, I don't think you're talking too much at all. And you framed all of that quite nicely. And it's a very tough conversation to have. And, here we are sitting in the middle of an era of digital transformation, but we're still using the old rules and the old frameworks. And we're still dividing things by local and state and regional and federal. And when something goes wrong, like a fax machine is the bottleneck for, getting relief to folks who really want some clarity around the most basic fundamental human right and need, their health, then everyone goes like this. And, Dustin, you and I talk, sometimes late into the night about, this whole idea that we have to jump into the era of transformation. And nothing makes that more clear than a global pandemic. So, again, when our quote unquote day jobs, we talk very seriously about all of this, and they're serious topics, but at the same time, we all have to come together as people and say, this just is not working. And so this is a way between you and I in 15 minutes having a little bit of fun around super serious things. So
That's right. I did fail to mention that we're boxing these into 15 minutes. So that way they're consumable, and that way we have to be concise and to the point. So it's
right.
An accountability thing. But yeah, I think in the case of this, digital transformation is not easy, and it's very simple to kind of throw a bunch of money at taking infrastructure and migrating it to the cloud and doing things like that. But there's more complex problems under the hood that we have to think about, like data standardization across not just, hospitals and not just government agencies, but, nationally. We have to start to think about how we standardize things. If you look at other countries like Canada, you look at what's happened in Germany, and they have data standards that served as a foundation so that when they put in place infrastructure for contact tracing and other things, they were able to leverage what they already have. So we're so fragmented here in the US when it comes to that creates natural challenges. And that's why, things like the fax machine still have to be supported, because for a rural hospital in the middle of nowhere, like that is their communication vehicle because they don't have connectivity.
Yeah, and it kind of starts with the frame of mind too. So it's easy to look at a headline like that and a picture of a fax machine and think of in our modern era, like, what the heck, are we in the dark ages here? And in some ways, yes. But, they're complex issues. There's HIPAA compliance and, all sorts of things around who owns the data as it gets transferred. And there has to be a whole RFP process in order to modernize all the different government processes. So, that part is challenging. So I have compassion for that. But at the same time, we have to stand up and quit relying on someone else to fix the problem. And I'm glad you brought up the idea or the notion of kind of what happens on the federal level, because we've politicized the federal level, for better or for worse. And, red, white, and blues, we don't have to get into all of that, R's and D's and blues and reds. But at the same time, it's cool to see that in the US, there's all these kind of grassroots private sector efforts like Data.World. But Dustin and I both live in Austin, and Data.World's an Austin-based company. So we get to cheer for the home team a little bit. But they've just taken it on themselves and said, we are going to create our own kind of master database and make this as accessible and invite everyone to help kind of set these standards, because we can't wait for another decade for a federal agency to do that, even though they absolutely probably should. So who's in charge of it and who writes the rules? And we can't just sit here and wait for that answer. We have to get busy.
Yeah, and I think that's an important maybe segue, is just what do we need to do as a market and as an industry around government to solve this problem? And it's not going to be just throwing money at it. And, you look at the CARES Act, and there was, a lot of funding allocated for all kinds of things, including, data health infrastructure for public health surveillance and other things. But that's not going to solve the problem either, because we still have some fundamental issues. So, I mean, it may be a terrible analogy, but I look at standards like the USB standard on your computer, right? That took competitors coming together, it took engineers coming together, it took a variety of different stakeholders from different sides of the fence that all came together, and they collaborated on a standard called USB, and they said, this is going to be the standard, we're all going to use it, and it's going to be our interoperability, right? So and then it comes down to city data, right, and county data, and public health data, and hospital data, and a lot of those standards are proprietary based on the software that they're using. They're considered, things that this is how we've always reported it. We're going to keep it that way. So there's not that level of collaboration. And where collaboration has taken place has been in pockets. And that's what we saw with COVID-19 responses. There were certain, bridges that were already assembled, which were great and did streamline things. But we didn't build the infrastructure for anyone else to connect to it. We didn't think about the notion of someone having archaic means of accessing us. So those are the things we have to start to think about, is, identifying a very diverse set of stakeholders, I think.
Right.
Start and thinking of the worst, possible, most archaic legacy technology that could possibly be a part of that. It's going to exist somewhere in the public sector, as we know, in someone's closet. And that's going to have to work. And, that I think is kind of a starting point. And then I think, assembling them. I mean, we've been talking about IoT standards now, right? There's IEEE's got a smart cities thing, which is great. No knock on that. But I think the challenge is the issues are more fundamental in nature than just thinking about how intelligent streetlights talk to each other. Now we need to have a conversation around how entities can actually share a base set of data and easily spin up things. Because I think one other point about kind of the times that we're in now, the next normal, the new normal, whatever normal we want to call it. It's
not that normal, by the way. So we even need a new word for that.
That's right. I mean, I kind of call it the new reality. I mean, this is a warm-up act for the rest of what it's going to be like. And although not every year is going to throw a global pandemic at us or social uprising or other things, we don't know what's going to come next, but we now have to move at such an accelerated pace. So it's like, hey, guess what, government? The people saw you move and pivot and react very quickly to that. That's amazing, but they're now going to expect that with everything that happens from this point forward. So, you did 3 years worth of work in 3 months, but that is now the new pace that you can operate in. So, it's going to create challenges, but it's that fundamental, I think, level that we have to start with getting the right people together and then having conversations on things that people don't naturally agree on. And data standards is a good starting point.
Yeah, everybody's got an opinion, right? Well, we've kind of always set up, going back to the formation of our country, this kind of dynamic of winners and losers. And I think we have to be willing to shift away from that. And yes, it's the right people in the room, but that's not an elite set of people. That's a set of doers and a set of entrepreneurs. And if we can think about that, and that it's a system of entrepreneurial thinkers, you don't necessarily have to be, the founder of a unicorn company, but you do have to be able to roll up sleeves, get busy, be humble, and welcome ideas that are not your own.
I think that's a really good point too, because, one thing that I failed to mention as a stakeholder is that entrepreneurial community, because we did see in response to COVID, startups as well as large enterprises that all played a really important role in kind of pivoting, government's response. They were deploying contact tracing solution. We saw CRMs pivot into lots of new areas.
Sure.
And, they also have to have a seat at the table and kind of really look at how to apply not just their knowledge, but also their software to new areas. But they apply to the data standard conversation as well, because a lot of the challenges that we have are because people see data as a proprietary thing. And they think that data,
value.
Right. It's the value. And yes, it is valuable if you're a company, completely, but you can still create open standards that can make that data useful. I mean, look at Esri and what they've done with GIS data. Esri is still a proprietary software product, but they've made their data standardized so that other products can tap into it, can leverage it, can ingest it, can read it, and more importantly, can put stuff back into it, which makes it more useful for everybody, whether you're an Esri user or another type of software product. So I think we have to kind of, remove the hesitation of opening up access to APIs and, getting standards of data that our competitors may use and actually see it as a positive.
Yeah. Well, I cut my teeth early in my career in the advertising agency world. And, back then, I won't mention how long it was, but, everybody's very worried about what logo they created and what PMS color that means, like the specific color that the logo could own. And there was that same kind of idea around, this is my proprietary idea, and fast forward to where we are today, nobody owns anything. And the ones who are succeeding are the ones who can wrap ideas and execute those well. So perhaps that's foreshadowing of where we are in digital transformation, that, data is data and it's everywhere and you can get whatever data you want. It's how you ask the right questions, apply that data thoughtfully, and really systematically produce interesting outputs. That creates, something of value, not the data itself. So that way everyone's incentivized to share, because ultimately we all win if we all have more.
Yeah, absolutely. We become smarter when we share and collaborate and have, the full picture to look at together. And I think that's where, we have to start thinking creatively about how we're going to solve this. And, government can do it through procurements where they start to require certain standards, but industry also can step up and start to lead some of those conversations, and build some standards there. And I think, the companies themselves can be a part of that, but also, these entrepreneurial communities that are out there, whether they're accelerators, whatever it might be, we really need to start to focus on, not just creating things that are nice to have in the market, but that also address some of the fundamental infrastructure issues that we have. And going to cloud is not going to solve everything. And I think there's a misconception that if you just ran a SaaS product, it's going to change everything, and all of a sudden your agency will have, instantaneous data-driven decision making. No, it's not going to happen, because
you can still, but not the thing. Yeah.
Right. I mean, you can still have clunky data that sits in a cloud environment as well. So I think we have to move. I mean, same thing. We've talked about smart cities at length. That's why we put a playbook out together, just because our frustration with the fact that smart cities was being thrown around as like the end all be all. All you have to do is pass a resolution and you're smart.
Right.
You have to move beyond that and start to deal with some of these harder topics.
Big time. And, at the end of the day, technology is a means to addressing the big social and civic challenges. And, it's kind of glib now to say at a smart cities conference, well, when we had smart cities conferences in their traditional sense, smart cities is all about people. but ultimately it is. And so in servicing the challenges that people ultimately experience, technology is just one tool and solution, but it's how people come together to address those. And you shouldn't have to have $1 million grant to get started in a process. That process is already in front of you. And just by putting the playbook on the web and making it free accessible, and you can download it anytime you want, it's up to everyone to get busy. So I think ultimately, I know collectively, that's what we want to see, is just people who think they have a solution. Great, get busy and join with other people, whether you're doing it in your local community or nationally or whatever span of area that you want. Just get working.
Yeah, I love that. And we're at our 15-minute mark, but I think your quote that it's up to everyone to get busy is a great way to end today's segment. And we'd love to hear from you all as well. So if there's topics that you think should be brought to the surface and to the forefront, and you want to talk about them or you want us to talk about them, let us know. Drop us a line. We'd love to hear from you. But this was fun. Always fun to talk to you about all the crazy things that are out there. And now you get to be a part of the conversation with us.
Yep. Definitely. And the only stipulation is that we're going to be really honest about it. So be careful what you ask for.
That's right. All right. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, y'all.